You're lying in bed at 2 a.m., replaying that moment when your friend offered to help you move. And instead of saying yes, you heard yourself saying, "I've got it handled," even though you're drowning and everyone can see it. The internal logic is instant. I can figure this out myself. I don't need to burden anyone. I've always managed alone before. If you recognize that voice in your own head, you're not alone. It's not about being strong or self sufficient. It's about something learned long ago, that needing others is dangerous. This isn't a character flaw, it's a survival strategy that's been protecting you longer than you realize. But that voice in your head, the one whispering, "Something is wrong with me," is actually echoing decades of cultural programming. Many cultural messages equate independence with strength, creating shame around needing support. From childhood, we're fed a steady diet of "pull yourself up by your bootstraps" and "strong people don't need help." The shame you feel isn't personal failure. It's cultural conditioning that's been so thoroughly absorbed it feels like truth. When people avoid asking for help, they're not broken. They're responding to a message they learned long ago, that vulnerability is weakness, that self-reliance is the only acceptable way to be. This conditioning runs so deep that admitting you need support can feel like admitting you're fundamentally flawed. But you're not. You're just operating from a script written before you had any say in it. This pattern starts in early childhood, when emotional attunement, the ability of caregivers to recognize and respond to a child's emotional needs, either happens or doesn't. When a toddler reaches up with tears after a fall and hears, "You're fine, stop being dramatic," something shifts. Emotions fail to elicit response, so the child concludes that feelings are irrelevant. Praise comes for handling everything alone. Asking for help feels like failure. This isn't about bad parenting. Many caregivers were themselves emotionally neglected and simply don't know how to respond to emotions. But the child's developing brain reads this silence as a clear message. Emotions are dangerous territory, and the safest strategy is complete self-sufficiency. Self-reliance becomes a survival strategy, being helpful to others while needing very little for yourself. An unconscious belief forms: "My deepest needs don't matter." What looks like strength is actually sophisticated emotional armor, built before you had any choice. Think about that moment when a toddler reaches up with tears after a fall, and the caregiver says, "You're fine, stop being dramatic." Does that sound familiar to your own childhood? Comment your answer below. Now let's dive into how this pattern becomes a protective strategy that follows us into adulthood. But here's what's remarkable about this pattern. It creates sophisticated psychological strengths others lack. People developing cognitive independence show analytical, reflective thinking, and exceptional problem-solving abilities. When you're forced to rely on yourself from an early age, you develop critical thinking, problem-solving, and self-management skills that become automatic. The brain that learned, "I can't depend on others," also learned, "I must become exceptionally capable myself." This creates cognitive resilience from years of practice. What looks like emotional distance is actually mental training that's been happening your entire life, and it's giving you abilities that people with consistent support often never develop. But here's where that sophisticated survival strategy starts to create its own challenges. When you're constantly scanning the environment for threats, whether emotional rejection or physical danger, your brain never fully learned how to rest. The nervous system that learned to stay alert never received the all-clear signal. This elevated state of perpetual vigilance can make it hard to sleep, to relax, to be present with others. Even neutral situations start to feel potentially dangerous. Asking for help feels like exposing yourself to attack. The irony is sharp. The armor that protected you becomes isolating. You end up managing everything alone, not because you're incapable, but because your threat detection system never learned to distinguish between real danger and safe connection. This isn't dysfunction. It's a finely tuned survival mechanism operating in a world that's changed. But the mechanism hasn't. The calibration is off. Your survival strategy of self-reliance has evolved into sophisticated emotional intelligence. What others perceive as distance is actually emotional fluency, the ability to self-regulate and manage emotions independently. This isn't a flaw to fix, but a strength you've mastered. You have the valid choice to either maintain your protective distance or selectively let others into the fortress you've built. Subscribe for more psychology that proves you're not broken, just different.